And I think there's a big debate about, can a good leader be a good manager, and what's the distinction between that? So there is lots of literature, in my view, which talks about, in different schools of literature, about, servant leadership and authentic leadership and, whatnot. So I think if you Google, there's so much on it. But in my understanding, or if I have to distill down, I would say that a leader is not a noun, it's a verb, which is to say that a leader doesn't become a leader because he has a certain title, because he has a certain name, because he's got a certain position. It is a verb, which means that, he's what he or she's doing, right? He's becoming a leader, she's becoming a leader because he served the community.
Are you tired of working more for less profits in your home service business? What if I could show you $100,000 in hidden annual profits in your business in less than 3 minutes? Would you be interested? And not only show you where, but how to create that 100K in 6 months or less without additional advertising or marketing spend guaranteed. Just go to sharpenthespearcoaching.com to see how truly simple it is. That's sharpenthespearcoaching.com. Do it now.
And we are back on Sharpen the Spear podcast with another great guest. I've got Nikhil with us today. We are going to be talking about leadership. It's going to be phenomenal, and it's not just a general leadership thing. Nikhil is bringing us some incredible experience, knowledge, and we're going to have a great time with that. But as we always do, I'm going to let Nikhil introduce himself, give a little backstory, bring us up to speed. Then we'll get into the bulk of our conversation. Nikhil, thanks for coming on the show.
Richard, it's a pleasure, and really looking forward to our conversation tonight.
Same here. Let's do it. Fill us in.
Yeah. So my story, if I have to give a short summary, it's essentially broken into two buckets. I grew up in India, but then I spent about the next 15 years, from about my high school years till about the age 30 or so. So that's the first sort of bucket of my life, professional life, which I spent in the U.S. So I completed my education, and the first about 8-9 years of work life was in financial services, both East Coast and West Coast, and doing a variety of roles from sales and fund accounting and auditing and you name it. And it's just a proper sort of a finance professional career. And then in 2002, I said, let's, at the time when Asia was sort of, becoming the emerging place, I said, this is a good time to get back. And I said, look, I will do just about anything, but I will run as far away as I can from teaching, training, consulting. But, sometimes, as the old saying goes, life is what happens to you when you're busy planning what to do with it, which is to say that, the very thing that you resist becomes sort of your calling. And so what ended up happening, Richard, is that I ended up dabbling my hand into academia for a little bit, but I got a very good consulting opportunity with a firm where I was onboarded, where I learned about leadership and leadership consulting. And so we build leadership solutions for leaders across Asia and across the globe. And so this was perhaps the best chapter where I think any little bit that I can give you some insights today is from that innings. And essentially, it took me to more than 30 countries. I learned how companies grapple with issues when they're trying to build a bench of leaders, whether you think about, young leaders grooming to be middle managers and middle managers trying to be groomed for senior leadership position. What goes into it? What do they look for? What are successful leaders all about, right? What do they do? How do they attract talent? And so these are some of the things that we can talk about. And so that part of my innings was there till about 2018. I finished my career. I was traveling a lot. I was given a much larger position, but I for family reasons, I kind of went on my own, and then I had a chance to finish some of my bucket list, which was giving a TED Talk, writing a book, and doing a podcast. So I do one on Gen Z. But I'm really excited, and let's talk about leadership, and hopefully we can bring some insights in your world and maybe our listeners together today. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Nikhil. So let's talk about this, because leadership is such a broad topic. Right now, you named some categories which I love, and there's whether it's Gen Z or, like you said, middle management to upper management, things like that. I used to think, way back in the day, especially my first 20 years of my first business, that I was a leader. I used to think I was a leader. I don't know if I was a leader. I got things done, I don't lead how I used to. Before it was do what I tell you or you're gone. That was my leadership mentality. I mean, I did stuff. I was kind of out front. I did all that, and I would just, to me, it was gain the respect of my people by doing work. Okay. So I'd be out doing it, making things happen, building things, show them I can do that, plus reel in this, plus sell. And it was more of me. It was like, look, I can do everything. So respect me as a leader and just do what I tell you. So I'll tell you, I've learned quite a bit since then, even the last 15 years on that. So I'd love to touch on, just in the beginning here, some basic qualities. Are there kind of universal qualities to leadership, or is this going to be just depends on the situation and the person, and what does that actually look like? Is that even a valid question?
No, you're asking, I think, a very good question, Richard, and which is often, and perhaps there's a theory in the leadership sort of literature, if you will, which again, I don't wish to bore our listeners with sort of more academic stuff, but it says that there is kind of a trait theory, which says that, if you have a certain traits in you, which could be, let's say, and, the list could be, whatever that we want, it could be, let's say, confidence and the ability to communicate and the ability to make good decisions and quick decisions and how to use intuition. If you can just demonstrate that, that's a leader. Now, some people are just gifted. Some people have that. We've seen it. And therefore, can we say that is it because of that, or have they grown, like you were sharing your experience? Most of us, as we pass through stages of life, we kind of realize that, okay, I was a very efficient manager. Was I efficient? I was a good leader. And I think there's a big debate about, can a good leader be a good manager, and what's the distinction between that? So there is lots of literature, in my view, which talks about, in different schools of literature, about, servant leadership and authentic leadership and, whatnot. So I think if you Google, there's so much on it. But in my understanding, or if I have to distill down, I would say that a leader is not a noun, it's a verb, which is to say that a leader doesn't become a leader because he has a certain title, because he has a certain name, because he's got a certain position. It is a verb, which means that, he's what he or she's doing, right? He's becoming a leader, she's becoming a leader because he served the community, he served his employees, he served the clients, right? And how do you do that, right? And we've all known stories where, companies are extremely profitable, but maybe there is a very toxic culture inside. And so do we admire that company because they're profitable, but how are they getting there? And, very stressful environment. And so what's the leadership about that, right? So I think there are several lenses to this, whole topic about, how do we define leadership? I think, and with time, Richard, what has happened is that there are schools of thought that have said that, okay, it was all about, IQ, and then it became EQ, and then it became relationship, which is sort of what people kind of talk about now. Relationship is a big way of kind of building and getting people together. So one is, me as an individual, that's one part of looking at leader, and the other is the broader definition of leadership, which is the collective, right? How do we, as a group, as a unit, make things happen, right? And so we hear things like the leadership of that company is very good. So that's not one person. That's a bench of some vice presidents. That's a group of some senior vice presidents who all carry certain values, who all carry certain, ways of looking at things and developing young talent and so on. So anyway, I'll pause here, but I will only say that leadership, let me just say leadership is not a noun, it's a verb. It's more about how you do what you do and how people see you defines, that term leader versus the title or, where you are in the hierarchy.
Right. Yeah. And that makes total sense to me because I'm a doer by nature. I do things, right? So like I said, I'll go out and do it. I'll teach. I'll show them how. I'll do all this kind of stuff. So, and I agree with you there for sure. Absolute 100%. It's a verb. I think that the complexities begin when things grow and you're leading more people, right? So I think, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe add to this. What you see is I can run 3 or 4 people I can lead. Okay. So I got 3 or 4 people on a team. Great. Well, now I got 10. Then you got 15. Then you got 30. And this one you're talking about, it's a team Because for me, I think the really good leaders make more leaders. So I think that's one of their qualities. They can create new leaders because they've got, if we're going to grow, we're going to expand, we're going to scale, we have to be able to have other people. One person isn't running 1,000 people.
Yeah.
That's total disconnect, right? It's just impossible. So I really like that aspect of it. And I think if you could touch on that a little bit too, just the leaders building leaders as you scale, or if your intention is to scale a business, let's say bring this in here, we're starting with one person and we're going to go to 150. Maybe that's the goal. Well, see, 150 is a lot of people to lead, okay, and lead well. So it probably comes down to a company culture, right, which is kind of a cliquey thing to say, but really is it a vision-driven business? How is this? How do they actually create the culture and the purpose for these people to work? And then understanding that, then you can have leadership that's able to instill that culture, right, carry it on, move it forward among that 100, 150 people, right?
Yeah, Richard, you said it so well, and you hit the nail on the head, which is that good leaders build more leaders, and the culture plays the pivotal role, right? So I'll give you a quick short story. We had a client where, this is a large conglomerate in India. They've got offices in 30 countries, a top name, top brand. And every year they have these chairman awards where, the chairman of the company, which is basically the family which owns the company, and, they're the fourth generation now. And so they recognize the businesses, they recognize individual leaders. And so in one particular instance, there's a business where a boss recommends his name as why the project succeeded. And in his very team, the subordinate or his direct report also recommends his name, saying that it's because of me. Now, when they look at that, okay, there are two entries coming from the same group. What should we do? And so, as you can guess, the HR intervened or the business leader intervened to say that, you know what? The boss's name should go out. It's time for this young person to shine. And this doesn't mean that the boss hadn't done a good job. In fact, they let the subordinate shine, but they sent a message to the boss as well that, look, we're very happy. You're creating people who could kind of replace you. And you don't need to be nervous about that. You don't need to be insecure about that. The fact that you built a bench that more people can take your job, it simply means that you're ready to do something bigger. And you're ready to do something much larger, right? And I think most leaders today, Richard, or in most companies, unless you have that culture, I think people don't, kind of open themselves up and buy in this philosophy. I've equally seen the opposite of this example, where in a large Big Four kind of a company, and they hold on to, their chair, they hold on to information they don't want to share because they're saying that, what, I did my time to get to this place, and now if I help this young rookie or this young person, he can outdo me. So there is sort of this, who's there to kind of make whom successful. And so you're absolutely right. And the culture makes all the difference. I think in most good companies, if I give you an example, Richard, Unilever in India is considered to be like the factory of, CEOs. And they have a very structured way of building high pool talent. And so what they do is that they distill that in a very robust way from the beginning. And they ensure that all of the people who are in this pool, they have to prove themselves at every level that they go forward, right? So it's not by chance, I got Nikhil in this pool, and by the way, now he's going to make it to the top. Nikhil has to prove next year and the next year and the next year, and so you're not there. So there is the pressure for them to perform, but it's also driven with the intent that they're growing as an individual. The moment you don't perform, the moment you don't, in their school of thought, like if you cannot lead teams in different cultures, you're not ready to be a global leader. So I could be fantastic leading a team here in India, but, if I have to lead a team in Europe, or let's say US, or let's say some young Gen Zs in America, if I cannot do that, I have to build that skill. And therefore, what they say is that it's very tightly managed, but the people who are in that, they also know what it took to come to that. So naturally, they kind of, bring talent with them. You're right. Culture has a big say. And I will also say that all the leaders that we have admired in our lives, let's look back. You can look back at your career, Richard. I can look at my career. Some of my best bosses were the bosses who wanted me to succeed. And The moment they let me shine more, what does that do? It simply brings so much loyalty to them, right? I mean, I can think of two excellent mentors in my career who just gave everything that they had to grow me. And I didn't care if I didn't get a good raise at that time. I simply wanted to grow. And today, still today, I think that, I stand by them. I have the highest allegiance for them because I just knew that deep down they wanted me to succeed. And so I think people see that. I think the younger generation definitely sees that. And so you're right. Leaders do build leaders. And if you don't do that, Richard, I would say that, sadly, if you're a boss who doesn't do that, and you got a young guy who's watching that behavior, he or she will actually take that as the definition of good leadership. So we have to be very careful. We have a lot of responsibility with us. And I say this especially for all our listeners, if they're young and then emerging and growing, be very careful of what you do and how you do and what happens, because people underneath you are watching. So if you think that you can get by, being angry or, just, pushing your weight down, remember they will take that as the way to lead, and you don't want that. It's just a bad habit they're sort of running. It's almost like, you learn bad things. If the parent is doing something wrong, the child learns it, right?
Yeah, so true. I think the whole merit structure, I've always been a fan of merit. So we're advancing by merit, by what we've done, not who we are, who we know, that whole thing. That whole old cliquey kind of corporate culture used to be that way. It's not what you know, who you know. And I mean, the who you know is kind of important. Yeah. What really is, like you said, if you're always, and some people take it wrong when you say like you're always improving every level, you're always being tested. Well, you have to be. You're not going to grow if you don't get that test. Okay, If you're just going to coast, okay, there's nothing there. Okay, eventually, if you're coasting, eventually you're going to stop, right? Because nothing's keeping you in motion. And these challenges and doing hard things, which I talk about all the time, is really important to advance you. And like you said, the leadership culture in a business, and again, it always starts at the top, the very, very top. If the CEO, the founder, whoever that is, and they have this thing of building more leaders, of scaling, and understand you can't scale without quality leaders, understand the vision of the business. Now they're given the green light to do that. So every selection process becomes, they're looking for the person who's not going to hold on to his power. He's looking to sharing it, growing it, and he'll go up. Most people only work for a certain amount of period, right? A certain amount of time in their life. So there is an end. Okay, but you can go as far as you want to go during that time and keep going. Then when the time's over, it's over. Maybe you move into something completely different. It's okay. But the skills of training others, I think like you said, Nikhil, you kind of didn't want to do it, but you got pulled into it because it's kind of your zone of genius, right? Yeah. I'm like that too as training. I'm a trainer. Whether it's physical training, business training. My same thing is I bring on coaches and they coach for me. My goal is for them to rise in the ranks. When we help businesses, my joy comes from helping other businesses succeed, right? So it's that desire for others' success. I think you mentioned it when you're talking about leadership. That is like a really, really, that should be high on my scale. That'd be high on the list. Do you actually enjoy seeing others succeed? Like, can give me examples. Show me. I do that with businesses. I turn them around and now they get time with their family, they're making more money, and they have the freedom. Like that's all I want. I want them to succeed because now they can run a business with the same principle, right? They're people, and we teach them how to do all that. So I love it.
Yeah. And I'll just say one thing here, Richard. You're so right. There's a beautiful, the other day there's a clip that I was watching online where they said that, look, there's this young, there's this retired sort of admiral in the U.S. and he when he was the admiral, he was invited to give a conference, talk at a conference. He was flown business class, and there was a limousine to pick him up, and all of that, take him in the back door, and take him to the stage and everything. And then he said that the next year I was invited to speak at the very same conference, except that he was retired, and then he had to fly a coach, he had to find his own taxi. And then he went and trying to ask for that ceramic cup, and he's got this sort of, not the ceramic cup, just sort of that plastic normal cup.
Right.
And then he said that, what's the lesson? He said that, that was never meant for me. It was meant for the position I had. And so the moment you're done, they're going to give all of that to the person who will have that position. Now, the point that he was trying to make is that we all can think of people that we want to remember, despite the fact that they're no more the boss, no more the VP or the CEO, because they've just made such an impact, right? Equally, we all want people to say, I'm glad that he's gone, or I'm glad that he's retired, or I'm glad that he's moved on, right? I mean, so what I'm saying is that I think all the people in leadership positions, they have a finite time to make an impact. And my message here to our listeners is to say that, look, as you said rightly, Richard, sometimes even in a good organization, you've done your best, you've given your 100%, you've grown a team, and you may not be rewarded. But just think about it this way: you've touched lives of enough people that at some point, somewhere, they will always remember you. And I always say that I think good leadership comes back and makes that full circle. And so, therefore, you're right. We have to enjoy, making sure that others succeed. That has to give you a joy. But we also equally wanted, the point that I want to make is that we have a finite time. So if I'm in a leadership kind of a ladder that I'm running, or I'm going to go up, if I'm in my 30s, I've got about 30 more years. So, I don't have to wait to become a CEO. I have to start impacting my team at 30, then 35, then 40, then 45, and, to whatever time that I decide to kind of, run on this treadmill. And I think the more we can start thinking like that, every day you're making an impact, there's always going to be good people who will say, you know what, I had a good boss, and I still remember him when I think about it.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great point, because we all, whether it was a teacher in school or wherever, a boss on a job, a leader, a project manager, whatever it is, we all can grab those names out of a hat right now. There's always someone. Right, even if it's one person, a coach or whatever. So I like what you said, because I love the word impact, right? Making impact. And people think you got to be all this to do impact. You don't have to be anything special to make impact. It's about what you do, who you care about, right? Like, it's like you becoming good at what you do. With my kids, I tell them the same thing. I have these basic rules when they start working. I go, you show up early, and you ask, what else can I do? I said, if you do those two things, you'll be the CEO before you know it, because nobody else does, right? I said, you just do those two things. Just understand, like, that's, I try to keep it super simple. Obviously, there's more things, but I think people had more of that attitude, like, show up willingly, just like, I'm happy to be here. And then what can I do? Just ask, and people will give you things to do, because most people don't want to do things. So we can easily separate ourselves to the upper percentile just by having a willingness to do things. And if you have a willingness to do things, I think as you get put into a leadership position, and you may go from worker to lead to maybe number one lead to assistant or whatever it is, right? There's a little progression, but that's where it all begins, because you have the willingness. So you start to climb that ladder, if you will. And it's important, but people see that and they're attracted to that. So other people who maybe aren't as willing as you will start to look at you as the leader. They'll come to you and ask a question. So they start to go to you, and then who sees that? The leaders above you, right? Yeah. So it's just a matter of executing on a daily basis. Yeah. It's really just going and doing the best you can every day, and it makes a difference. And I'll tell you what else, Nikhil, it buys you favor. Okay, what it does, that willingness, like, say there is a day you're late or something, they're going to let that stuff slide. Yeah. Okay, where the guy who's always late, they're not going to let that stuff slide. Or when it comes time to cut back, right, you're going to be the one who's left standing. Yeah. That's what I tell my kids, because we had an incident with a client of mine, big thing, and same thing. There's the people who they put in a bonus, and you got it for doing this or this, and nothing changed after a year and a half. It was like an attendance bonus, okay? Right. So it was $400 a month if you just showed up, okay, before the time you started, like you punched in on time, and you called in if you were going to be sick, and you didn't leave early. Yeah. 3 things. And you got $400 more a month. Okay, there's about 45 employees. After a year and a half, you know who got the bonus? The same people who already showed up early, who already called in, okay, and never left early, right? Yeah. They're the same one. Nothing changed. Yep. People's behavior, and it was shocking. But then I was like, well, here's the good news. Those people that didn't change, they all have a target on their back. If you got to cut back, you know who to go to first. There's no question. If things get tight, you got to cut back. Like those people have already raised their hand. Please lay me off.
Yeah.
Because I'm unwilling to, show up, just do my job and get paid extra for it. So, it's just, this was an experiment in leadership too.
But I think you make such a good point there, Richard, about, I think this advice, I hope that all our listeners, especially young managers who are coming into their work life, I think your story there was so important because, these are subtle things that perhaps nobody tells us. But like you said, that look, when a boss has to make that tough choice, whom to cut, he's going to keep these things in mind, right? And we have to always remember that, a good leader always, it's not easy, right? It's the things that it's what Michael Phelps once said after hanging up, saying that the greats of all walks of life will do things even when they don't want to. And I feel like it's such a golden statement that, I can, whether you think about sports, whether you think about any field of life, right? If you admire someone, they're always doing things that the ordinary person, feels lazy or complains or, finds an excuse or blames somebody, right? And I think that's the distinction between the good and the great, right? And I think I just want to highlight your story to especially our young listeners to say that please, even just in the story, 3 things, like just making a routine of that. How difficult is that? But that can build into so much bigger for you, right? And so I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, thank you. I just think everything has to start with a foundation. We have to build on top of something. We can't just put stuff up on the sand, so to speak. Can't build a house on sand. Okay, we need a foundation. Right, we have to have that. And these little things are your foundational stuff. All my kids, I have 6 kids, and they started working early. One of my kids was working at 9 years old. Like working on the farm, doing this, and he's still working. He's almost 18, and last week he put in 95 hours.
My goodness,
working.
wow.
He's not afraid to work, okay. Now, we all got our issues and stuff, but that boy can work. My other kid, one's in the Marine Corps, right? And he's a top achiever there. But they all have this mindset where they've got their hands dirty. They've done the work. I made them get jobs, right? You don't get to start as an entrepreneur. That's one thing I told them. You don't get to start you can try to own a business when you're young, but the best education you're going to get is go work for somebody, go work under people. Go see the bad managers. And they got to see a lot of bad managers because that's important. It's great if you go and you have these wonderful managers and you get to, but the reality is when you know what you don't want or what you don't want to be, you're way ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Right. Especially from a leadership standpoint, you've got to see good and bad. And if you can get both at one place, and they work like a fast food place, they start there and you get one good one and you have 3 bad ones, and it's and they're a different way, but they see the difference. And I said, that's the lessons you want to take away. You're not there to earn a ton of money. You're there to do the job and take this experience and learn how to lead people. And it's been really pleasing to me to see them in leadership roles now because they understood that. And I'm not taking the credit. I'm saying that exposure to that stuff gives them the ability to see, oh, yeah, I would not like to be treated like that.
Absolutely.
I think there's a better way to do this.
Yeah. We used to run, Richard, in one of our clients, a vignette or a play, and this is about this boss hires this young person and they're sort of role-playing it. And he's obviously been hired as an engineer, but he keeps giving him all the tasks for a sales job. And every time he calls him in a meeting, he's always finding faults. Like, okay, you're not doing this right, you're not doing that right, and how many times do I have to tell you this and that? Anyway, it kind of goes on like year 1, year 2, 3, year 4. And this guy is quite frustrated. Now, in the end of the 5th year, this boss has to make a decision. Like, okay, you know what? I got to promote someone, but now who do I have? Like, it seems like I have no good guy. But that guy, I keep kind of, complaining about. He seems like a decent guy. Let me elevate him. And then, of course, he promotes him. Now, we at the end of the vignette, we just try to show that when this person becomes the boss, what do you think he does? He does the same thing that his boss, which is that he starts finding faults in everybody that he's working with. Oh, you're not good at this, you're not good at that. So leadership is a learned behavior. And I think you make such an excellent point that whether it's our children, whether it's some consulting assignment, whoever it is, like, if we don't be careful of how we carry ourselves, we don't know the amount of damage or the impact that we're making. And as a young person, the Gen Z generation see it, and they see it very quickly. And they're not even shy in telling us that sometimes. Well, yeah, I mean, that's another part of it. And so I think you're right. When you see that, you know what not to do. And that's just as important.
Yeah, I like I said, I think it's brought a lot of fruit, to my children's lives and how they're able to advance and do things. But I really like the point that, and I think I'll drive this home just like you said, whatever you expose yourself to, this includes your friends, right? We always talk about the circle, the 5 closest people in your circle. Whatever they're doing, you reflect that. You're making the same money, same kind of job, same everything, right? So, and I tell my kids this all the time because they kind of make fun of me because I don't have a huge friend circle.
Well,
I just got no friends.
You're not saying that.
Yeah, so it's like I go, no, I have the right friends. No, I don't have a lot of friends. I have the right friends, and they're very few, but they're I call them my trench buddies. The guys who always have my back, guys I go to war with, right? I tell them all the time, you have to understand who you're hanging out with, and they've got to, again, go through it. They've hung out with the not so great kids that are no longer their friends because they realized this doesn't. And I don't mean it's a self-centered thing. How can I advance? Sure. What I mean is you want other people on the same mission as you, with like my ideas, like that. That's what you want. And when you get into a workplace, like you're saying, that I want you to talk about this because you're kind of really good at the Gen Z stuff here too. You're kind of dug into that a lot, but they see it rapidly. Like you said, they see it quickly, but it's, how do you adjust to that? Is it walk away? So let's talk about that a little bit. Nikhil, tell me about, they get in a place and maybe the money's good, right? Maybe they're making some, the best so far and this, but everything else is like misery, right? Because there's all the things we just talked about. What, dig into that a little bit and what all that looks like.
Yeah. No, look, Richard, it's such an excellent question, and I can, talk quite long on this, but just to, I think to kind of keep it straight, which is that, the Gen Z generation has seen a lot. I think as there's the term that there's a midlife crisis, there's often a term called the quarter life crisis, which means that here's a generation which has seen, pandemic, they're seeing the Me Too movement, they're seeing fake news, they're seeing AI, they're seeing climate crisis. So they're seeing a lot. They're born into the internet. They're seeing a war. I mean, so there's a lot that they've seen, and they're also, what they're seeing is driving their values. So they're very passionate about the earth. They're very passionate about sustainability, and so on. But unlike, to come to your point, unlike the other generations, so let's say someone like in our age, or let's say a boomer generation or Generation X, we were much more, how shall I say, almost comfortable receiving. We didn't have a notion of a bad boss. I mean, I think we were happy to just go to work and, we were told that, hey, put your head down, do your time, and there you go. But I think the Gen Y and the Gen Z generation grew up in a different context, more jobs, more opportunities. I think the whole idea of toxic culture, which was happening, was getting exposed more. It is getting exposed more now, right? And so I think the notion of a bad boss maybe didn't even exist for, people like in the Boomer and the Gen X, because they were just, they valued a good brand, a good loyalty, hierarchy. They respected hierarchy, and they kind of went about it. Now, in this generation, they want frequent feedback. They want to be involved. They want to be engaged, right? And so the moment you're not doing any of this or they're not getting it right, they're giving you the feedback. And like you rightly said, I have known, Richard, in some of the top B schools here where, kids have joined an investment bank, kids have joined like a top consulting company because there's the peer pressure of, hey, who got the highest salary? And 2 years later, they're out like quitting because they're now doing and running their own NGO, or they're wanting to take a time off, because I think all the talk about culture trumps the paycheck is something that they have to experience firsthand, right? I think there's a time and age in which we can say that, I can tolerate a bad boss for maybe 2-3 years because, I need the money, or I'm going to kind of grind it out. But, And if you were to ask you and me, and, they say, hey, I'm going to, give you 5x of what you're making, but you're going to have this horrible boss and you will have this horrible culture. No say, nothing, just go down. We're going to not go. We're not going to sign up for it, right? And I think most common sensical people will say, no, I don't want this. And so I think a lot of this they have to experience firsthand. And as you rightly said in your own example, right, when they see the bad, they know what not to do. And a lot of this is also like that. So if you get a very high salary, but if you don't have a say in what you want to do, if you don't get autonomy, if you don't get the freedom, I think here is a generation which will be restless very quickly, unlike the other generation. So I think companies have to be, and I do this all the time where I see companies are working extra hard to keep them engaged, to create a culture which sort of keeps them happy. So while pay is very important, don't get me wrong. I think if they're a choice between company A and company B, all things being equal, if company A is giving them slightly more money, they're going to go for that. But I think the realization that if there is a trade-off with a slight little less on the money, but everything else, like I get more exposure, more travel, more assignments, more this, more that, I think they'll opt for that. And I think as managers, we have to keep that in mind. As business owners, we have to keep that in mind. As companies, we have to keep in mind. And the more we can do that, I think the higher the chance for us to retain them.
Yeah, I think, what we do when we're working with businesses too, a big thing I do when you talked earlier about a vision-driven business. So I think, and this falls right in line, there's three things, okay, the main three things, like especially these Gen Zers looking, right? It starts purpose. They're looking for purpose, number one. Then they're looking for recognition, right? Quality feedback. They need that. Then it's money. Money can even be fourth. And I'm not saying it's quality pay. You don't underpay them, but the first two, that's what matters, like you just said. If they come and there's a purpose and they understand the whole company is working towards fulfilling this vision, they want to be part of that. They need to make a difference, right? It's not put A into B all day, go home when the bell rings. They just don't want that. That is not, it's not fulfilling really for anybody. People will do it, but it's not fulfilling for them. So purpose and then recognition. And it doesn't mean like they need trophies all the time. What it means is, am I doing a good job?
Yeah.
Well, how can I be better? Well, how can you help me become a better person? Stuff like that, right? They want recognition like you matter. You are doing a good job or you're doing a bad job. They're okay with both as long as they're getting that. Then the money. And the money will come. But like you said it just right. If they can trade, because I have clients who have built their businesses this way now. People will take a pay cut to come work for them. They'll take $2 an hour a pay cut because they want to be in that culture. Everybody's had people are working, they're doing things, and I see it all the time, and it changes. Yeah. And when we roll out a new vision for the company, you can't believe the emotion in the room when people read this vision that we write. They're like, this is what I'm talking about. Now they want to come to work. Now they understand how they fit in this, how they're the hero in this whole journey. And without them, this doesn't happen. That's purpose. If we give them that again, and where does leadership fit in that? Every single level.
Yep.
When they're all working that way, you've got a pool now to create, develop, bring into the next level. It's really amazing. So I love this conversation because I'm so glad without prompting, you were able to hit on all this stuff that I kind of know, so it's good.
No, and I want to just quickly to close out that point, Richard, I can tell you, we work for a company which was a GE subsidiary. And I can tell you, they were our client for more than 12 years. And it's such a fantastic company, GE culture about, building people and all of that. And we've seen so many of the people, we ran programs for them at the middle level for more than 12 years. Now, a lot of those guys, they always used to say, you know what, we don't want to go to our competitors. I know I could get twice the salary because the amount of learning that's happening here is not going to happen anywhere. And I've also met people who have gone out only to come back, okay? And I think to your point about feedback, I would totally agree. I have seen companies now, Richard, who have done away with the classic, okay, we're going to sit down 6 months and do your review. We're going to sit down at the end of the year, do a review. I think that's done. I mean, that may be still there on paper, but for the most part, managers are now told that, look, You got to give them real-time feedback. You got to give feedback on project. You got to do a debrief. You got to do a check-in. You got to do a feed-forward conversation. All of these things matter, and the more you can do that, I know like companies like Deloitte, they've done away with the traditional sort of bell curve, and we'll get together a quarter after, like, because most people don't remember. They won't remember. Right. You won't remember. And there's this guy called Daniel Pink. He's written a book called The Drive, and what he says in that book is that there are two sets of factors that bring employees in. There's an explicit and implicit. The explicit is all about, I got a brand, I got a title, I got the perks, I got the location, blah, blah, blah. Like, if there's a wish list of 10, and let's say if I got 8 out of the 10, most people are happy. But if you got the 8 out of the 10, but if you don't have any freedom, if you're not growing, if you don't have purpose, if you're not getting psychological safety, people will leave. And I think I think there is so much truth to that, perhaps more now than ever before, which is that you could have other things, but like you said, if you're not growing, you're not giving feedback, if you're not getting the exposure, I think the monotony will get there, and then you will see people leaving.
I think, and all of that is absolutely true. And there's one from a business standpoint also, if you can do all of that, right, put all these things in place that we were just talking about, you know what else goes up? Profitability. You become a highly profitable company because everyone is performing. Everyone is on task, right? They're doing their things. They're also, the innovation is encouraged. That's part of building them up as people, right? They understand. So it went, because people, Nikhil, sometimes they throw that company culture. You need to change your company culture, and they don't have a clue how, right? They just say it and it sounds cool. But when you actually know how, when you understand that it's about your people, because some people, I don't know what they think company culture is. I get all kinds of weird ideas about what it is, but I'm like, it's about people. Okay, it's about the people. That's where the culture is, okay? You don't have a culture of machines, okay? You have the people that are operating in your systems. Plenty of great systems, all this stuff, but we're putting people into those. They have to be able to operate at a high level. When you can do that, that's when your business changes. And not just because you have retention, because you've increased your retention. You have people who want to be there and perform. So there's no real loss in this approach. Nothing loses. You're not losing ground anywhere by taking this. Now, there's people who say, well, I'm just going to pay everybody $80,000 a year, and that's the minimum. And it's stupid, okay, because they're not attaching the value to the positions. They're just trying to be altruistic and whatever. And they're closed in 12 to 18 months. They go under, right? Because it's not sustainable. So we can't be stupid. Okay, understand.
No, I think
totally, right? So I mean, it's just you got to understand who you're working with, and how to cultivate that. That's what matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where a lot of companies, Richard, are investing far more time up front to get the right person, and hopefully they have a culture as well. But if you get the right person and you don't have the culture, then good luck, as you say, 12, 18 months, they're gone.
Yeah, so true. It's really, that's a powerful thing. It's what we've done with the companies we work with is we build out the strategic vision. It's what we start with. And now it's part of the hiring process. They have to read it before they even get a 5-minute phone call with us. And they have to tell us, did you read it? Yes. Okay. Where do you see yourself fit? And they, because it's all part story, part fact. It's really cool. It's what the company is going to be achieving. So we created the process that can get the right people because they know where they're going. They can read exactly what they're coming into. A lot of people want the job because maybe the dollar amount's right or whatever, the location, but they get into it, like you said, and they go, what have I done? What is this place? And they'll leave. So, so just to wrap all this up, I've really enjoyed the conversation because I think we've gone from like almost old school leadership, the man holding on to the power, holding on to the chair, to like spreading it out, making more leaders, going through all that, to creating the culture in the business that can create new leaders who understand the culture and can continue and grow the culture of the business as leaders inside the company. And everyone's working towards that purpose. So I think we've really covered a pretty nice swing through all that to see how you can really have a very effective business, maintain high retention of your employees, right? Really get an ROI, because I truly believe every employee is an asset to the company, right? If it's done right, they're earning more. The company's earning more because of them than you're paying them. They're bringing more value than they're being paid for, right? Because you designed the culture that way. So they become free in my mind. They're free.
Yeah.
They produce so much. They don't, it's their assets. I have 57 assets, 1,000 assets, working inside my company. That's always been my goal. So this has been awesome. Any final thoughts on leadership, Nikhil?
No, I think, look, I really enjoyed this, Richard, and I will only say for just kind of, going down from the Gen Z top upwards that, look, for our young listeners, the Gen Zs, to say that, look, they have a full life ahead of them. They come with a lot of potential, creativity, and, like we've discussed, I think in a time where money does matter. I mean, it'll always be there in the top 2, top 3. I think the culture, finding the right boss, finding the right fit is so much more important in the longer run. So I think the one word of advice would be for that kind of a cohort would be to say that, look, think longitudinally about your career, right? I think early in your career, you want to learn the right habits. And therefore, if you get a good mentor, hold on to that person. Like be with him for as long as you can, because someday when you become a leader, you will kind of give back what you've learned, and you will know what was good and bad. And as far as we think about, as we kind of talked about the senior, middle leaders, I think the only advice there is that, look, leadership is all about a learned behavior. And so you have a finite time. You're there. You got to make the most of it. Yeah, everyone wants a certain perk and a title and, a fancy car and whatnot. I mean, I think they're all good to have. No one can take that away. But at the end of the day, you will be always only remembered for the amount of people that you've touched their lives, right? And I do this exercise called the River of Life, in which I say that, okay, tell me the people who have impacted you in your life. And I always say that, as you said, Richard, at the beginning, that it could be a teacher, it could be a brother, it could be your sister, it could be a neighbor, for example. Sometimes people who have impacted us most are not people who may have PhDs or who may have, built large businesses. They've just told us the right thing at the right time and in the right way, and they've inspired us. And I always say that for those who are with a title, I say that you have so much more going for you. So make the most of it. Make sure that, the money, the perks, and all of that will always be there. But what won't be there is that when you're done, you want the people to say that, what, I had that one excellent boss called Richard, and boy, among my career of 40 years, I can think of 2 good guys. Rich was one, and someone else was another one, right? And that takes a lot of hard work. So do the hard thing, but it will be a reward. You will feel satisfied and you will succeed.
I love it. I love it. Okay. Well, how can people get in touch? You got books. They can follow you, websites. Just give us the goods. I'll put them all in the show notes, of course. But how can people get in touch with you, follow you?
Sure. No problem. I think the easiest way, Richard, for us, for anyone to get in touch is LinkedIn. You can look me up, LinkedIn. The first name, Nikhil, last name, Raval. You can just see, I think a lot of my work is done in the Gen Z space. So if you have a curiosity for that young group, you can check out a book that I've written. It's called Target Gen Z, available on Amazon and the most platforms. And then also a podcast that I run just to help the young managers and everything in their lives. And there is also a website, but I think the LinkedIn is the easiest way, because there you'll get information about everything else for me, the talks that I've given and all of that. And
great.
Yeah, I hope that we've helped our listeners and made sure that they learn a little bit about leadership. It's something that we all can do and we must do as part of giving back.
Yeah, I think it's been great for sure, guys. If you're looking at the Gen Z thing is a really important word, because we're always looking for the future. Okay, we all get it. We all age. As a matter of fact, today is my birthday. I'm another year older today. Okay, so it just keeps going. So let's look at what's coming up in the workforce. What are they looking for? What do they need? We just talked a lot about it. You can get a ton of information on that from Nikhil here. So check out his LinkedIn page. And again, Nikhil, pleasure having you on. Great conversation. And for my listeners, we'll be back again for another great guest and topic. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, Richard.
And don't forget, revenue feeds the ego, profit feeds the family. So if you want to see how I can show you at least $100,000 in hidden annual profits in less than 3 minutes, and not only show you where, but how to create that 100K in 6 months or less without additional advertising or marketing spend, guaranteed, just go to sharpenthespearcoaching.com. See how truly simple it is. That's sharpenthespearcoaching.com. Do it now.